The world welcomes the new year in with a bang. Fireworks have lit up the skies from the southern hemisphere to the Middle East. In the UK, wet weather has not dampened the return of the post-COVID party spirit.
Yeah, it's been great. We ditched the umbrella and went with the poncho instead.
Waited so long for it and it's amazing. Even in the weather and the rain, it's brilliant.
We will be counting down to midnight on this programme from the celebrations in London and in Edinburgh. Also tonight, Pope Francis pays tribute to his predecessor, Benedict XVI, who's died at the age of 95. A warning over the return of COVID tests for visitors from China and...
Rashford showed his strength, then showed his finishing ability.
Marcus Rashford comes off the naughty step to secure a win for United.
This is ITV News with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. The world is already welcoming 2023, and for many countries, the spectacular celebrations symbolise a return to normality after years of COVID disruption. For the first time since 2019, the London fireworks display and Edinburgh Hogmanay events are back in full force. It is now just less than 20 minutes until Big Ben strikes midnight and the celebrations begin. We will be counting down with John Ray in central London and Louise Scott in Edinburgh. But first, Charlie Frost on how the world has marked the arrival of 2023.
Australia's signature fireworks over Sydney Harbour Bridge helped get the New Year's celebrations underway with a bang. Around 1 million people there watching, ringing in 2023. Not to be outdone, the United Arab Emirates set the bar high, entering the new year with a world record attempt. More than 400 drones and 15,000 lights went into making this spectacular display.
Happy New Year!
For Hong Kong, it was a pyrotechnic and multimedia light show against the backdrop of Victoria Harbour and the city skyline. While closer to home, an hour ahead of us, France celebrated with 8 minutes of fireworks over the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe. Shortly, it will be the UK's turn. In Scotland, the final tests have been completed, and despite the wet weather, thousands of partygoers from around the world have flocked to Edinburgh to take part in the traditional Hogmanay as the celebrations return for the first time in 3 years.
Pretty amazing to be here after not having much going on for us at all in Australia the last couple of years. It's really excited to be in Europe. Yeah, it's been great. We ditched the umbrella and went with the poncho instead.
Waited so long for it and it's amazing. Even in the weather and the rain, it's brilliant.
In London, crowds are also back to take in the capital's spectacle. The city's mayor promising a show that will be the biggest yet.
The last 2 years have been awful for our city, for our country and for the planet with the pandemic. These will be the first fireworks we've had in London with people, with fireworks since 2019. It's a really important night to get people together, a really important night for the rest of the world to see our great city, but also a really important night to celebrate 2023 coming, but also to reflect on the last year.
Not long to go, anticipation is building for an unforgettable show and the promise of a new year. Charlie Frost, ITV News.
And we'll bring you the countdown to midnight in a few minutes' time from the banks of the Thames in London and the Hogmanay celebrations in Edinburgh. But first, the rest of the day's news. Pope Francis has praised his predecessor, Benedict XVI, as noble and gentle after the former pontiff's death at the age of 95. Pope Benedict became the first head of the Catholic Church to resign in nearly 600 years when he stepped down in 2013, citing old age and poor health. King Charles has paid his own tribute to the former Pope's constant efforts to promote peace and goodwill to all people. Julie Etchingham now looks back at his life.
The papacy of Benedict XVI will be forever remembered by his resignation from it. The first pope in 600 years to step down, this quiet, studious man shocked the world when in 2013 he said the role had become too much for him to bear. Just 8 years before, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger had become the oldest pope elected for nearly 3 centuries.
Cari fratelli e sorelle.
He had almost as a motto, faith in God is not a problem to be solved, but it's a richness to be discovered again.
Born into a Bavarian family, the son of a policeman, the young Joseph was conscripted into the Hitler Youth, but later deserted. He was appointed Archbishop of Munich in 1977. As Cardinal Ratzinger, Benedict became right-hand man to his predecessor, Pope John Paul II, as anger was beginning to grow over the abuse scandal. Nicknamed God's Rottweiler by some, there were claims he did not take the issues seriously enough. But as Pope, Benedict did confront the issue and accepted the Church's guilt. On his visit to Britain in 2010, he met victims of abuse in private and offered a full public apology.
Above all, I express my deep sorrow to the innocent victims of these unspeakable crimes.
The Pope was a man of great compassion who cared deeply about global conflict. This was ground zero in 2008.
God of peace, bring your peace to our violent world. Peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of the earth.
He took that message to 2 American presidents and to Prime Minister David Cameron. Unlike his predecessor, Benedict was a reluctant pope, a studious, thoughtful man, a pianist who loved Beethoven and cats, and who lived out his final years in tranquility and privacy.
We are moved as we recall him as such a noble person, so kind, and we feel such gratitude in our hearts. Gratitude to God for having given him to the Church and to the world.
His critics say he failed to adapt the Church to the 21st century. But his beliefs that its strength lay in traditional values and absolute truths struck a deep chord with those who flocked in their thousands to see him.
Former Pope Benedict XVI, who's died at the age of 95. Business leaders in the UK have questioned the government's plan to reintroduce travel restrictions for people arriving from China after a spike in COVID cases there. From next Thursday, passengers flying direct from China to England will need to return a negative test before boarding. Tourism bosses and some Conservative backbenchers have warned it must not be allowed to spiral into a new wave of restrictions. And Shihab Khan reports.
This might sound like we're travelling back in time, but for the first time in a long while, there will be COVID restrictions for some travellers. Following a surge of cases in China, England has decided you'll need a negative test if you're coming from there direct. But the government is keen to stress this is precautionary.
You know, we did so well to remove all our COVID-related restrictions. We don't want to go back there. We've learned the hard way of what it takes out of us. But we need to stress that this is isolated because of China failing to open up its data, failing to share with the world what's been going on in China.
China decided to lift its zero COVID policy after people began protesting at the long-standing strict restrictions. Since then, there's been a surge of cases, but with the borders reopening, many are worried that COVID will spread around the world. But not everyone thinks this is the right strategy.
It is double standard. I mean, we know for sure that there's a really fast-spreading new variant in New York that's now dominant in New England and the US, and it's growing really rapidly here. But we haven't cared about that at all. I think it's a way of also trying to signal, oh, we've beaten it and China haven't. which I don't think is the right interpretation either, because firstly, we haven't beaten it, and secondly, we've had a lot of death and illness over the last 3 years.
England is not the only country doing this. The US, Italy and Spain are among those who have introduced restrictions too, but there are concerns it could have a negative impact.
We would want to see these restrictions lifted as soon as they possibly can be, given that Chinese visitors are so valuable to the UK economy.
After dealing with COVID for such a long time, the hope will be as we head into the new year, this doesn't snowball into something bigger. Shihab Khan, ITV News.
A man has died in an avalanche on the north face of Ben Nevis. The Lochaber Mountain Rescue Team were dispatched yesterday afternoon, but the 48-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene. Another man, aged 40, was taken to hospital. 2 men have been charged with the murder of 23-year-old Cody Fisher, who was stabbed on the dance floor of the Crane nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day. 21-year-old Cammy Carpenter and 22-year-old Remy Gordon will appear in court on Monday. And dozens of missiles launched by Russia have hit cities across Ukraine, killing at least 1 person in Kyiv. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is warning that Russia could launch more attacks, forcing Ukrainians to celebrate the new year in darkness. Brazil is in the middle of 3 days of national mourning for the footballing legend Pelé ahead of his funeral next week. Over the next few days, his coffin will be transported to his final resting place. Our sports editor Steve Scott is in Sao Paulo. Steve, before the commemorations for Pelé, there's another significant event taking place in Brazil.
Yes, you were right, Romney. There are a few highly significant days ahead for Brazil, starting with the inauguration of the new president tomorrow after a closely fought election. There are security concerns about that ceremony with the prospect of violent protest in Brasilia. But the day after that, this politically divided nation will almost certainly unite to pay tribute to its most favourite son. Pelé's body will leave here in Sao Paulo and his coffin will be placed in Santos Football Stadium on Monday, where it will stay for 24 hours to allow tens of thousands of people to file past and pay their respects. Then on Tuesday, it will be driven through the streets of Santos for the last time ahead of a private family funeral. Then at the end of that, he will be buried in a 14-storey high cemetery, and that will be Pelé's final resting place.
Steve Scott in Brazil, thank you. In the Premier League, Arsenal fans are dreaming of big things in the new year after title rivals Manchester City dropped points today in a 1-1 draw with Everton. The Gunners then took advantage with a 4-2 win at Brighton, a victory that takes them 7 points clear at the top. Chris Scudder was watching.
Last night of 2022 and a goal almost in the first minute. This was like the great old Arsenal on New Year's Eve.
Is able to give Arsenal the lead.
The fans could have had the bubbly out early. Odegaard made it 2-0. And when Martinelli set up Eddie Nketiah for a third, the Gunners were cruising on the south coast. It wasn't all plain sailing. Brighton also scored twice, but fittingly in the week of the great Pelé's death, Brazilian Martinelli rounded off the victory that takes Arsenal 7 points clear at the top.
3-goal cushion, and that is how to quieten the noise.
So he's been a bad boy. Marcus Rashford's New Year's Eve started by being dropped for Manchester United's match at Wolves for disciplinary reasons. Further signs that United boss Erik ten Hag is laying down the law. But it had the desired effect, and Rashford came off the subs bench to score the winning goal.
Rashford showed his strength, then showed his finishing ability, and he started the day on the naughty step.
The England striker had redeemed himself, and boss ten Hag's hard-line approach to discipline was bearing fruit. 5 wins in a row for United to close the year, and Rashford and the boss end it all friends again. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
Also celebrating tonight are the people on the King's first ever New Year's honours list. More than 1,000 names feature, including charity workers, politicians, musicians and sports stars. Queen guitarist Brian May has been knighted for services to music and charity. There are more than 1,000 recipients on the main list. 4 of England's Euros winning squad have been recognised, while Olympian Denise Lewis has been made a Dame.
It's the icing on the cake for what has been an amazing life in sports. Yes, I've had some incredible highs and highlights, of which obviously the Sydney is the pinnacle. This one sits right up there.
Well, we're now less than 5 minutes away from ringing in the new year across the UK. In a moment, we'll speak to Louise Scott in Edinburgh, but first to John Ray in central London. John, what can we expect from the banks of the Thames there?
Well, the moment is almost upon us, Romilly. From my right to my left, there are very, very deep crowds of people here to witness what they are told will be the best firework display anywhere in Europe tonight. Behind me, a spectacular stage has already been set. There are something like 12,000 fireworks that they will set off at the rate of 1,000 per minute. That is a lot of bang for your buck. More broadly, this is a show which we are told will in part pay tribute to the passing of Queen Elizabeth last year and look forward to the coronation of Charles next year. But a lot of the people we've spoken to here tonight have never seen a celebration like this before. How could they have done? There's been a pandemic. This, they are told, will be well worth waiting for.
Thank you, John. And to Louise now in Edinburgh. How are things shaping up there with the return of the big Hogmanay celebrations?
Well, people have been waiting 3 years to once again be able to fully experience the New Year celebrations in Scotland's capital. And despite the weather not being so favourable, it's been raining here for several hours now. It hasn't dampened the atmosphere. The ponchos are out and the excitement is well and truly building as we head towards the bells. We're on Prince's Street, part of the street party where there's 30,000 people. Further back in the gardens, another 10,000. It is scaled back a little from pre-pandemic, but everyone here is just excited to be able to be celebrating again. And I've been speaking to people from all over the world: Australia, Israel, Mexico and Argentina, leaving sunnier climates to head here and really celebrate Hogmanay the Scottish way.
Louise, thank you. So as we enter the final seconds of 2022, let's go back to London's South Bank. The lucky crowds who managed to secure tickets for what we're told will be the largest fireworks display in Europe. More than 100,000 people lining each side of the Thames for the first time in 3 years. The show, we're told, will celebrate the successes of last year and look forward to the big events planned for 2023. And the Mayor says they've a couple of surprises up their sleeves. The celebrations continue here in London to mark the beginning of a new year, watched by tens of thousands of people lining the banks of the River Thames for the first time in 3 years. A display reflecting on the huge events of 2022 and looking ahead to 2023. So it leaves me only to say, from all of us here, a very happy new year.
Feel-good weather continues throughout the evening, which wraps the day up nicely. Heinz Seriously Good Vegan Mayo sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello and a very happy new year to you. Welcome to 2023. I hope that it's a lovely year for you. From a weather point of view, we start off with mixed fortunes as we roll into a brand new year. As you can see, there is a fair amount of dry weather across the central and southern parts of the UK, turning rather murky into the afternoon and not entirely dry because we do have these rather squally showers rattling in from the west at times. Across more northern parts, wintry hazards really the name of the game for you. We've still got some rain around and it turns fairly wintry across the higher ground. Ice is also going to be a problem for Northern Ireland. Again, it's going to be largely dry, rather cloudy with a few showers in places. It's mild in the south, across the north feeling rather chilly. And then we look ahead to the first week of 2023. It's going to be a rather chilly start to the new year, but dry at first at least. And then as we move through the week, it becomes wet and windy, but turning a little bit milder. That's it. A very happy new year to you. See you soon.
Heinz Seriously Good Vegan Mayo sponsors ITV National Weather.
Welcome to the show where it's all about the dough.
How much do you think you ordered today? 3.5 grand?
5 pairs of contestants, 1 gold card. Whoever locates the card will be living it large. Spend it wise to avoid surprise, because the other contestants are chasing your investments.
They know how to spend money.
So travel Greece in stealth to end up with all the wealth. Loaded in Paradise. Stream free now on ITVX.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
Hello again and a very happy new year to you. Well, 2022, certainly a year full of weather contrasts, and actually the new year looking fairly similar in the sense that we've got a pretty chilly start with bright sunshine finally at least returning. But thereafter, well, business resumes. Unsettled, wet, windy spells take over yet again. For the here and now, we finally lose the low pressure and the frontal systems bit by bit, so still a couple of showers in their wake. Notice though for New Year's Day itself, still clinging to that milder air as well. But by Bank Holiday Monday, what a different story. The blues taking over across the map out there. Sharp, widespread frost into Tuesday morning, but into the bargain, of course, that lovely sunshine making a return. For the here and now, still a couple of showers nagging into the early hours of the morning, but they'll be few and far between and fizzling away. So a much quieter second half to the night. Still quite breezy nonetheless, but this actually helping to keep the temperatures up. So a mild enough start if you're up at about first thing on New Year's Day. Still some downpours to be had nonetheless, yes, but actually some decent sunshine between things already. It's trying tomorrow, although clouding over later ahead of a damp evening. Still just about on the mild side though.
Valent sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
In this, their 133rd year, everyone at Tunnocks promises you another year of superb quality biscuits and wishes you and yours, wherever you are, a truly happy, healthy new year.
Fast forward to December 2023 and a lot has changed. Some things, some more than others. A lot can change in a year, except for gift gas prices, which are fixed until the end of 2023.
Press this, and you can see this, hear this,